Hey, what's up, everybody? Um, gonna make a video today about veganism and its coincidence with pseudoscientific beliefs, which seems rampant in the vegan community. And I think it's a real problem for our credibility as a movement. Um, so I think, vegans have a really strong footing when it comes to the ethical argument. You can't really deny facts such as factory farming being what it is, the instance of cruelty within factory farming, um, and the like, and certain things like that. You have videos that confirm how animals are treated. The industry itself doesn't deny certain industry-wide practices such as debeaking, the castration of pigs without anesthetic, so on and so forth, right? Um, at that point, it merely becomes a matter of philosophical debate as to how wide you stretch your the circle of moral consideration that you have. Some people only wrap humans in that circle. Vegans just happen to make that circle bigger and wrap animals as well that are sentient and grant them moral consideration. And what all that means is that they take into account the suffering of animals as well. Whereas with, seemingly, at least in a de facto sense, with meat eaters, they don't broaden their circle that wide. Um, so there's, it's a pretty solid argument. Um, you just need, again, it's hard to convince people to broaden their ethical considerations because it's value based essentially at some point. I mean, there are facts involved that you may weigh, but it comes down to values, which is not as easy to weigh as facts are, and it's more individual. Um, okay, and then we have the environmental argument, which at this point, and after Cowspiracy being a movie that delivered this argument to a very large number of people in the same way that Earthlings delivered the ethical argument essentially to a large number of people, is a good thing, I think. Um, and basically just argued that, animal agriculture is responsible significantly for global warming and the degradation of our environment. So it starts to bring into the fold people that consider themselves environmentalists, and implicitly makes the charge that if you're an environmentalist and you eat meat, you're kind of at odds with yourself. And that's a pretty good argument. A lot of people care about the environment. Um, and then here, I think the trouble is when it comes to the health argument. Here, this argument is rife with pseudoscience, and I think this is partially attributable to the fact that medical science is very I don't want to say capricious, but kind of topsy turvy. It's unstable. Medical truths, quote unquote, have changed over the years. What was once bad is now good. What was once good is now bad, and etc. So it seems in this area people are more likely to just adopt whatever beliefs they want to hold, and through confirmation bias continually confirm them because there's always a doctor somewhere with an MD after his name, obviously, or his or her name, to espouse certain ideas that people are going to agree with. So, for instance, you know, the idea that humans are herbivores is a common justification for veganism, which is not borne out anywhere in mainstream science. There are some doctors that think this and will try to provide evidence for this. There's that chart that's floating around on the internet that compares morphology to make the case, between canines, intestinal length, and all that stuff. And I've seen it, and I was convinced by that at one point. I was like, God damn it, we are herbivores. Being veganism is natural, right? It's a way to combat the argument by meat eaters that meat eating is natural. And it's when you believe that, it's very easy to argue against that, at least from your angle. The problem is that it's not true. Humans are omnivores. That chart doesn't prove shit, for one, because it's somewhat fraudulent, uh, and it doesn't prove that humans are herbivores. So this is, I think, we're now getting to one point where veganisms are espousing essentially pseudoscientific claims, and we need to stop doing it. I think it's essentially almost insulting to the validity of other arguments, such as the ethical argument, as if that isn't enough, or the environmental argument. We don't need a health argument, because the insinuation is that things such as the China study, which, as far as I'm concerned, is not a good source. What's it called? Damn it. It's a kind of study that basically establishes correlation, not causation, right? So trying to therefore claim a causal connection between animal products and certain diseases is, I think, ampliative in a way that's going too far. I just wanted to use that word. It's basically overextending what can be concluded from what's been researched and found out. There may be some correlations between the ingestion of animal products within a population and the incidence of certain diseases, but establishing a causal connection cannot be done from an epidemiological study. That's what I meant to say. Because that's just a limitation of that kind of study. So people will cite the China study as this like overwhelming evidence that animal products are categorically bad. That's fucking bullshit. You can't make categorical statements like that apply to the entire category of animal products. Ignoring levels of ingestion, for instance. Let's talk about that. Like, for instance, there's safety thresholds for literally every chemical, and when I say chemical, I mean in the true sense of the word chemical with respect to chemistry. What do you think chemistry studies? Chemicals. Water is a chemical. Hydrogen is a chemical. Oxygen is a chemical, in the scientific sense. So every single chemical has a safety threshold. There is not. Well, there may be a few, but I'd venture to guess that even for the most dangerous, you could have, like, for instance, one molecule of cyanide and your body is not going to kill you. There's a point at which it becomes lethal. The same with water. You can die from drinking too much water. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what will. So, same thing with any possibly dangerous chemicals that might exist in animal products. There is a threshold below which you're fine. And all I'm saying is that a perfectly healthy omnivorous diet is totally feasible and totally possible because guess what? We're omnivores. And, if this causes cognitive dissonance in people, in vegans, it's only because they hold the belief that humans are herbivores when we're not. So how do I deal with this? Well, there's no need to appeal to nature for what we ought to do. The only thing that I ought to do, and by my own volition and my own imperative, is survive. I don't need to abide by how it's been done before in the past or how nature does it, right? All I need to do is ingest a finite list of chemicals that enables my body to function. And to say that isn't attainable on a vegan diet, I think is just folly. The fact that I have to take a B12 supplement, so what? So what it's unnatural? Who cares? Why is natural good? Why is natural the way things ought to be? That's just an appeal to nature. It's, philosophically, it's deriving an ought from an is, which in the 200 years plus since David Hume has not been defeated. This is the idea that you can't take an instance of what is and try to derive what ought to be the case. That's called the is ought problem, which is what the appeal to nature is founded upon, as well as the naturalistic fallacy, although that's a little bit more vague. They're kind of the same. They're just confusing. But anyway, it doesn't matter that humans have eaten meat traditionally or historically in order to get a complete list of vitamins so that they can be healthy. At this day and age, with technology being what it is, we can attain the same nutrients without having to cause suffering to animals. And I think necessity is a huge factor when considering morality. Animals don't have a choice. First of all, they don't have the cognitive ability to even contemplate the idea of choice. Second of all, they don't know any other choices, even if they do exist, because that's how they're basically programmed. And while you may say that's demeaning to animals, I don't give a shit. That's That's the way it is for animals. They don't have the same cognitive abilities to contemplate any and all alternatives to, let's say, a lion hunting down a gazelle. What do you think? He's like, well, gee, I could go eat a fucking leaf right now, but I'm going to kill a gazelle because it tastes good. No. Like, that's how they're programmed. In the same sense that the reason we feel sexually attracted to people, that program is there. It's not really susceptible to kind of agency in the sense of changing it. And, lions want to fucking kill something. But I mean, cats are obligate carnivores, so humans are not. Okay, so I just went on for a while about, I'm not sure what, but okay, so this is just with respect to veganism. I made this way too long. It's also the case that within the vegan community, what is rampant is also like just other pseudoscientific beliefs about the law of attraction or quantum mechanics, being evidence for the law of attraction, which is totally fucking untrue. There aren't barely any quantum mechanical physicists who would say that. That's just Deepak Chopra talking, and he's not a physicist. These kinds of things mar our credibility. And I just think that a nice healthy dose of skepticism is what the vegan movement needs. We're also prone to conspiracy theories, writing off the fact that mainstream science doesn't back humans being herbivores with the explanation that, well, they're all paid off and they have some vested interest to not, it's basically ad hoc reasoning to explain away the fact that mainstream science doesn't side with humans. And that's generally not a good thing. You don't want to be committing ad hoc reasoning. What I mean by that is that in order to maintain the idea that it is true that humans are herbivores, you have to explain the fact that mainstream science doesn't believe that. And in order to explain that, you essentially have to posit a conspiracy theory that they're full of an experimental bias where they're reading into the research what they themselves believe. To say that's the case with the overwhelming majority of scientists who don't think humans are herbivores, I think it's too much ad hoc reasoning to ever be valid. Ad hoc reasoning isn't always bad. Like Einstein did it with the cosmological constant, and he turned out to basically be correct. But Einstein's a fucking genius. So, anyway, that's my video. I don't know what else to say. I'm out of ideas. Peace.